I will speak in English. I'll try to do my best. And I think that the images, the pictures I have to show you may be more talkable than myself. So let us go. And thank you again for your invitation. It was very kind. Okay, in Portugal, of course, I'm Portuguese, so I will talk about the Iberian Peninsula, but also a bit more about Portugal. In Portugal, many people is worried about sea level rise because we have a serious problem of coastal erosion. And so much of the people says that the main cause of it is the sea level rise and maybe even a sea level acceleration. But is it true? Sea level is something rather complex. You have two plates on this balance. You have the oceans, the come up and down of the sea level, and the continents. And the continents are affecting, of course, the movements of the continents are affecting the last result of the relative sea level. I will underline the word relative sea level because it is what it is. And you can never forget that 18,000 years ago we had the big inland seas covering all the north of Europe. And this has consequences on the movements of land and, of course, on sea level. And in this area, what we have, the ice is pushing the land and making a depression. And in the forebulge area, around the inland seas, you have an elevation. Then, when the glaciation is over, the things change. On the contrary, you have an uplift in the Scandinavia, and you have a depression, a subsiding area around it. It is the forebulge collapse that we are going to talk a little about. And of course, Scandinavia is uplifting quite a lot. You have more, almost 300 meters of uplifting, and it is too much, and a lot of raised beaches. And, of course, around it, you have an area where there is no uplift, is a kind of ground zero. And then in the forebulge area, you have subsiding area where, of course, sea level probably is going to come up more than other places that are not suffering this subsiding. The result is that one. So you have the uplift of Scandinavia and all the rest of Europe as apparently a rising sea level. Of course, around the two areas, you have these white marks showing the places where there is no uplift and no subsiding. With all these stations, it's possible to build this kind of graphs. You have from north to south. You have a number of years of the series, which is important because the longer the series, the best data you have, the best are the averages you can get. So they are in yellow. And you have here the highest point is Brest in France, and Cascais has also a quite long series. Cascais is in Portugal, near Lisbon. So what you see is in north of Europe, you have areas where the sea level is going down, and about here the sea level is more or less zero, and then sea level is rising in the rest of Europe. You have a more simplified curve here that says more or less the same thing. It was expected that after this forebulge, the sea level was more or less around 0 or 1 millimeter, but no. The truth is that at the Iberian Peninsula, and I show you the place of Coruña, is the beginning of Iberian Peninsula, you have a lot of ups and downs in the curve. So we can guess there are more reasons for this, and I think that they are tectonic reasons, because Iberian Peninsula is an area with some strong alpine cordilleras in the north and the south. So recent tectonic movements. So this is a kind of abstract of what I told before. In the Iberian Peninsula, I think that is important to underline these tectonic active areas in the Pyrenees and the Batic Cordillera. Okay, we can to make some conclusions about it. You can see that there are places in the internet you can find with the GPS data, very recent GPS data, for the coastal stations in Europe. You can see the Google Earth map with that. And with this data, I did this graph, and you see more or less what we expect. It means in the northern Europe, you have the land uplifting. You have here... Microphone, please. Yeah. You have here a lot of stations where the sea level is rising. Sea level is rising, yes, and the land is subsiding in the forebulge. This is only the GPS data, okay? Only GPS data. So it is the tectonic, the diastrophism part of the problem. And going to the Iberian Peninsula, you see that you have places where the land is going down, is subsiding, and other places, and there are quite a few, where the land is uplifting. So the idea of the tectonic movements I told you before. But the problem is there an accelerated sea level rise in Iberia? Using only the permanent service for mean sea level data, you can see that the western coast of the peninsula, it means Portugal, has no data, no actualized data. Is a pity. It's something. It's a shame, I should say. It's a shame, because we are a country of sailors, they say. And, okay, but with this data, nevertheless, with the data, sometimes they are not completely actualized. It's possible to do this kind of graphs. And in violet, I have some stations, some important stations. Cascais, who has 112 years of data. Lagos, in the Algarve, who has 91, and Cádiz. No, not Cádiz, sorry. Bonanza, more than 100 years. And you can see something interesting. The places where the sea level rise is more important, it can reach 12 millimeters per year, are places where the series is very, very short, 5 years. So this means nothing. And the places where the series are longer are places where the sea level has about 1 millimeter, 1.5, less than 2 millimeters generally. So here you have all the data together, the average, the biggest, which is Bonanza, I told you. The place of Cascais is right in the middle, 1 millimeter, 3 per year, and even places where the sea level seems to be going down. Can do a study like this and understand that the stations where you have bigger sea level rises are the stations with very small series, and the other ones have decent sea level rises. They don't attain the 5 millimeters. The bigger is 4 millimeters, and they are, of course, longer series in this population, this kind of population. Well, trying to do the same thing I did before with the GPS data. Sagres is an important place for Portuguese because it was from there that the navigators sailed out for the New World. And at Sagres, you can see data that are every minute a very detailed sea level curve that gives this kind of thing. Cascais. It should be the most important station in Portugal because it's where we get the leveling for all the country. Stopped more than a year ago, so there is some problems in the tidal gauge and they don't publish the data. Nevertheless, they can send the data for you, the old data, and we can see that sea level is 18 centimeters above the sea level that was designed in 1938 for all the country. And the data of permanent service for mean sea level, which is the only data that are sure and published all over the world, this gives this kind of curve, and this curve with ups and downs as usual, and this regression that gives a 1,3 millimeters per year. However, people that have access to this detailed data can make a curve like this, you see, with several areas of the curve, and they, in the hand, which is very astonishing, they can even imagine a rise of 4 millimeters per year, which is a nonsense, I should say. It is the process they use, and several corrections. The problem is in the corrections. They made corrections with the data. And one of the corrections is that they used an uplift for Cascais, uplift of 0.5 millimeter per year. So if the land is uplifting, of course, sea level is going up more than the numbers, the real numbers. Is that true? I should say no. Looking to the GPS data, we can see that Cascais is not uplifting, not at all. If there is something going down and not uplifting. So the subsiding situation of Cascais, even if it is not very strong, it is very low, the trend, but even that doesn't work for making a bigger sea level rise. And I must say that most of the stations in Portugal, at least, and the ones I saw in the Iberia, most of them, like Lagos in the Algarve, they have a subsiding trend. So the sea level curves we see, they are exaggerated because the land is downlifting. Of course, they have now this absolute sea level data, and what we can see is not to be afraid of. Here is about 0, here at Ceuta is about 0, and you have some situations about 1 millimeter. The maximum is 4 millimeter here at Cádiz. These are the absolute sea level data for the Iberian Peninsula. So, is more or less the conclusions I tried to show you. And I think that coastal erosion has very little to do with this. Probably sea level rise as a primary factor for coastal erosion is simply a false question. I will explain it, try to mix everything together in a place I know. And the coastline, 15 kilometers to the south of Porto, we have Espinho, which is a small city, and where you have soft sediments. In the north of Espinho, you have bedrock, strong bedrock, granites and metamorphic rocks. But after Espinho, what you have, Espinho is there, you have beach sands and dunes. So not very hard for the sea to cut. Espinho is probably the worst place in Portugal for seeing coastal erosion. They made a rampart that was destroyed 2 years ago. And of course, the city was quite different from the first sites of it. It has more than 200 meters of retreat coastline. The problem was so big that they decided to build these big groins with more than 300 meters encircling Espinho. And now Espinho seems more or less protected. But what happens to the south is a problem. Here you see Espinho, and then you see all the beaches to the south. They are suffering a severe erosion. Looking to these different maps, this map was from 1978, and this one 1995. So after they made this, everything was transformed, and all the coastline is very irregular with a lot of groins. Here you have an important place, is Meeresspiegelvera Lagoon. Okay, the smoking gun, I think there's no doubt about the smoking gun. Another place where the erosion, coastal erosion is spectacular is São Pedro de Maceda Beach. And here you have several positions took from Google Earth Maps. In 2003, the top of the cliff was here, and now the top of the cliff is here. It makes, making it very carefully, it makes about 10 years per 10 meters per year of coastal retreat, which is a lot, really. So you see the place of the first staircase they made for people to have access to the beach. This is completely destroyed. And if we see some recent works made on coastal erosion, here is the northern part of the country, and here is Porto and Douro, and the area where the soft sediments appear and where coastal advance and retreat is much bigger, but all the places have something to do where the advance or retreat of coastline are great. All the places, they have something to do with man action. because they make big groins to defend the cities, like Espinho, or they make big groins to defend the entrance of the harbors, like at Aveiro. Another problem, which is very important, is that they make dams around the rivers. They use a lot of hydroelectricity. And so the dams retain the sediments. And the Douro, which is the most powerful river in the Iberian Peninsula, only takes 15% of the sediments used to take to the sea. So the sea has no sand to redistribute along the coast. And this is, the beaches are dying because of lack of sediments. Another thing that I think it can help to understand what is happening at Espinho is that there are evidences that the sediments here in this area, Porto is here, north of Porto, they are going down, they are balanced to the south, and here there is a different trend. They seem to be balanced to the north. So you have a depot center here, just the place where you have big erosion at Espinho and also a lagoon. So something that tells us that the geomorphology of the coastline has something to do with recent tectonic movements. At least this is what I believe. I deeply believe that. So you can never forget that the erosion at Espinho, it begins after the end of the Little Ice Age. This is an important question. So, about the causes of coastal erosion, that most of alarmists say that it is sea level rise. They say it is sea level rise mostly, and it's impossible to stop it unless we stop using CO2, of course. Geosurfism can have some influence. Lack of sediments, I think, is very important. And human constructions. On this soft sediment area of Portugal, I think, is really the most important issue. Thinking on the global level, you can see that the absolute rise of sea level is not so terrible as they used to say, because they talk about 4 millimeters, 3 millimeters, 14 centimeters in the end of this century. It's not true. Simply is not true. Everyone that has access to these sites on the internet, they are not skeptical sites. They are official sites. Everyone can see that you have here places where the sea level, the absolute sea level, is more or less zero. And you have, of course, here a big one, probably is Cadiz, and some other big ones, but nothing of the kind they tell us, and they try to alarm us and make us fear the invasion of Cologne. I know the cathedral, and this picture was very interesting for me to see the cathedral drowned in the water. Rising, how much? How much is it rising? 1 millimeter, between 1 millimeter, 2 millimeters, or less. It depends on tectonic situation. And so I think that this old picture from Professor Morner is very important to understand that the end of the Little Ice Age lead us to a lower sea level, about 1830 or something, in the Dalton minimum. And then you have a rise of sea level. But you must read the scale here. And the scale tells us that in more than 100 years, sea level rose 12 centimeters, which is in accord with all the data we found in these sophisticated and new sites. So I think that this is some picture you must keep in mind to try to fight against the alarmism on sea level rise. And thanks for your attention.